The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the cold. Anyone driving through northern Minnesota in late December expects the cold to feel alive, to bite through gloves, crawl beneath coats, and settle deep into bone like a quiet threat. No, the first sign was the silence. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the soft, snow-muted quiet of a winter forest. It was a hollow silence, the kind that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. Daniel Harper noticed it the moment his car rolled off Highway 71 and onto the narrow, unmarked road that his GPS insisted was the fastest route to Blackridge Lake. He turned down the radio, as if that would somehow make the silence make more sense, but it only made it worse. The tires crunched against packed snow, loud and unnatural, echoing out into a landscape that didn't answer back. Daniel wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. The trip had been a last-minute decision, the kind people make when they're trying to outrun something they can't quite name. A bad year, a failed relationship, a growing sense that life had quietly gone off track somewhere along the way. Blackridge Lake had come up in a travel blog, a hidden winter paradise, the article had promised, complete with cozy cabins, ice fishing, and a small-town charm that felt untouched by time. It had sounded perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But Daniel hadn't been in the mood to question it. Now, as the trees grew denser and the road narrower, he began to wish he had. The forest pressed in on both sides. Tall pines weighed down with snow that glowed faintly in the weak light of his headlights. The sky had already darkened, even though it wasn't yet 5. Up here, winter swallowed the day whole. Daniel checked his phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual, but it still made something tighten in his chest. He kept driving. The GPS map had frozen. The blue line stuck on a stretch of road that seemed to go on forever without changing. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fuel gauge dipped lower than he liked, and then he saw it. At first it looked like a reflection, something bright flickering between the trees ahead. He slowed the car, squinting through the windshield. As he got closer, the trees opened up, and the road curved gently downward toward a wide expanse of ice. A lake, frozen solid, stretching out like a pale, endless sheet beneath the darkening sky. Lights glowed faintly across its surface. Not reflections, lights. Daniel frowned, easing his foot onto the brake. "That's not right," he muttered to himself. The GPS had said the town was at the edge of the lake, not on it. But the road didn't stop. It continued straight onto the ice. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn around, but the narrow road made that difficult, and the thought of getting stuck out here in the dark, in this cold with no signal and dwindling fuel, was worse. He swallowed, tightened his grip on the steering wheel, and slowly drove forward. The tires rolled from asphalt onto packed snow and ice with a subtle shift in sound. The car creaked faintly as if protesting. Daniel held his breath. The ice held. The lights grew clearer as he moved further out. They weren't scattered randomly. They formed lines, clusters, shapes that began to look disturbingly organized. Buildings, structures. His heart began to pound harder. There was something out there on the lake, something that looked very much like a town. "That's impossible," he whispered, but the evidence was right in front of him. As he approached, details sharpened. Wooden houses, low and squat, their roofs heavy with snow. Narrow streets carved into the ice itself. Lanterns hanging from posts, their light flickering in a wind Daniel couldn't feel inside the car. And people. He saw movement, figures walking slowly between the buildings, bundled in heavy coats that looked oddly old-fashioned. None of them seemed to notice the car approaching. Or maybe they were ignoring it. Daniel brought the car to a stop at what looked like the edge of the settlement. His engine idled loudly in the silence. For a long moment he just sat there, staring. His breath fogged the inside of the windshield. "Okay," he said finally, trying to steady himself. "There's a logical explanation. There has to be. Maybe it was some kind of seasonal ice village, a tourist attraction that hadn't been mentioned online." That didn't explain why it looked decades out of date, or why it felt so wrong. He opened the car door. The cold hit him instantly, sharper than anything he'd felt before, like a physical force pushing against him. He stepped out carefully, boots crunching on the ice. The sound seemed to echo unnaturally far. The figures in the distance slowed. A few of them turned. Daniel felt it, then a shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable. A tension. He wasn't alone out here, and whatever lived in this place had just noticed him. "Hello," he called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Hey, is this a Blackridge Lake?" The question sounded ridiculous even to him, but it was the only thing he could think to say. No one answered. The figures began to move toward him. Not running, not even hurrying, just walking, slow and deliberate, as if they had all the time in the world. Daniel felt a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature settle into his stomach. Something about the way they moved was wrong. Too synchronized, too quiet. He took a step back toward the car. "Okay," he muttered. "Nope, I'm leaving." He reached for the door handle, but before he could open it, he heard a voice behind him. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel spun around. A man stood a few feet away, close enough that Daniel had no idea how he'd approached without making a sound. He was tall, thin, his face pale and lined, his eyes dark and unreadable. He wore a heavy coat that looked like it belonged to another century. Frost clung to the edges of his beard. "I got lost," Daniel said quickly. "My GPS, this road, it brought me here. I didn't mean to." The man studied him for a long moment. Then he glanced past Daniel toward the approaching figures. His expression tightened. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He yanked open the car door and slid inside, hands shaking as he fumbled for the keys. The engine was still running. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and threw the car into reverse. But the car didn't move. He pressed the accelerator harder. The engine roared, the tires spun, but the car stayed exactly where it was. Daniel's breath came faster. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." He tried shifting gears, rocking the car back and forth, but it was no use. It was as if something beneath the ice had reached up and grabbed hold of the vehicle, anchoring it in place. Outside, the figures had drawn closer. Daniel could see them clearly now. Their faces were pale, their skin stretched too tight, their eyes dark and hollow. Their movements were stiff, almost mechanical, and they were all staring at him. The man outside the car stepped closer to the window. He raised a hand and tapped the glass once, gently. Daniel flinched. "You stayed too long," the man said quietly. Daniel shook his head, panic rising. "What is this place? What's wrong with them?" The man didn't answer immediately. He looked out over the frozen town, his expression distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost drowned out by the wind. "This isn't a place you find," he said. "It's a place that finds you." The figures reached the car. Hands pressed against the windows. Pale fingers, stiff and cold, leaving faint trails of frost on the glass. Daniel recoiled, scrambling backward in his seat. "Get away from me," he shouted. But they didn't react. They just stood there, surrounding the car, their empty eyes fixed on him. The man outside sighed. "They'll take you below," he said, "just like the others." Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. Below what? The man met his gaze, and for the first time, Daniel saw something like pity in his eyes. "Below the lake," he said. "That's where the town really is." And then, with a sound like distant thunder, the ice beneath the car began to crack. Here's asterisk part 2 asterisk continuing directly in the same dark cinematic single flow style. The crack didn't sound like something breaking, it sounded like something waking up. It began as a low, groaning vibration beneath the car, a deep, resonant noise that traveled up through the tires and into the metal frame, into Daniel's bones. He froze, hands locked around the steering wheel, breath caught somewhere between a gasp and the scream. Outside, the figures didn't move. They didn't need to. Their pale hands remained pressed against the glass, fingers splayed, unmoving, as if they already knew what was about to happen. The man standing near the hood took a slow step back, his expression unchanged, as though he had seen this moment play out countless times before. The ice split with a sharp, violent crack. A jagged line shot outward beneath the car, branching like lightning across the frozen surface. Daniel jerked the wheel instinctively, as if he could steer away from it, but there was nowhere to go. The crack spread faster, racing beneath the tires, creeping outward toward the dark shapes of the buildings. For a split second, everything seemed to pause. The sound, the movement, even the wind, like the world itself, hesitated. Then the ice gave way. The car dropped. It wasn't a clean fall. The front end plunged first, smashing through the ice with a deafening crash, sending shards of frozen water exploding upward. Daniel screamed as the world tilted violently, his body thrown forward against the seatbelt. Freezing water surged in through the shattered windshield, hitting him like a wall. It stole the air from his lungs instantly, replacing it with a suffocating, burning cold that felt like fire. The car sank. Daniel thrashed, instinct taking over. His hands fumbled blindly for the seatbelt latch, his fingers numb almost instantly. The water rose fast, swallowing the dashboard, the steering wheel, his chest. His breath came in panicked bursts, each one shorter than the last. "No, no, no," he gasped, but the words dissolved into bubbles as the water reached his face. The seatbelt clicked free. He kicked forward, forcing himself through the broken windshield, shards of ice and glass scraping against his coat and skin. The cold was unbearable now, a crushing force that wrapped around him, pulling him down. He expected darkness beneath the lake, an empty void, but that's not what he saw. There were lights, faint at first, glowing far below like distant stars buried beneath the water. As he sank, they grew brighter, sharper, resolving into shapes. Streets, windows, structures. The same town he had seen above the ice, but clearer, larger, and impossibly intact beneath the surface. Daniel's mind refused to process it. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But his body kept sinking, drawn downward by something stronger than gravity. His lungs burned, his vision blurred at the edges, and then something moved below him. Shapes detached themselves from the glowing streets, rising slowly through the dark water. Figures, dozens of them. Their movements were smoother than those above, almost fluid, their limbs drifting as if they belonged to the water itself. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dim light of the submerged town. They were coming for him. Daniel kicked harder, trying to fight his way back to the surface, but the distance had already grown too great. The broken ice above him looked impossibly far away, a jagged, distant ceiling. His chest tightened violently. He couldn't hold his breath any longer. One of the figures reached him. Its hand closed around his wrist. The grip was impossibly strong, cold beyond anything he had ever felt. Daniel tried to pull away, but more hands followed, grasping his arms, his legs, his coat, holding him in place. He opened his mouth to scream, and the water rushed in. Everything went black. When Daniel woke, he wasn't breathing. At least, it didn't feel like breathing. There was no desperate need for air, no burning in his chest. Instead, there was a strange, hollow stillness inside him, as if something essential had been removed. He lay on his back, staring upward at a dim, wavering ceiling of light. Water surrounded him, but he wasn't drowning. He sat up slowly. He was inside the town, not the broken, half-seen version beneath the ice, but a complete, solid place. Buildings stood around him, their structures clearer now, their windows glowing with a soft, unnatural light. The streets were covered not in snow, but in a thin layer of frost that shimmered like glass. Above him, instead of a sky, there was the underside of the frozen lake, a vast, pale barrier that distorted the world beyond it. Daniel's heart should have been racing. It wasn't. He felt wrong, slower, distant from his own body. "You're awake." The voice came from behind him. Daniel turned. The man from the surface stood a few feet away, exactly as he had before. Same coat, same pale face, same unreadable eyes. But here, beneath the lake, there was something else about him. Something heavier, older. Daniel staggered to his feet. What is this? His voice sounded muted, as if the water swallowed part of it before it could reach his ears. "How am I alive?" the man finished quietly. "You're not." The words hit harder than the cold ever had. Daniel shook his head. "No, that's not. I'm standing. I'm talking." You crossed the threshold," the man said. "That's all it takes." Daniel looked down at his hands. They looked normal, solid, but when he flexed his fingers, the movement felt delayed, like he was controlling something that wasn't entirely his anymore. "What is this place?" he asked again, his voice quieter now. The man glanced around the town. "What's left of it," he said, "or what it became." Daniel followed his gaze. The figures he had seen in the water were everywhere now, walking through the streets, standing in doorways, watching. Up close, they looked less human than before. Their skin had a grayish tint, their movements just slightly out of sync with reality, like a film playing at the wrong speed. "They were travelers," the man continued. "Like you. People who got lost. People who came here when the lake froze over." He paused. "People who stayed too long." Daniel's stomach twisted. "And now this?" The man nodded. "The town feeds on them. It always has." "Feeds?" Daniel echoed. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Every winter, when the lake freezes, the boundary weakens, the town rises, just enough to be found. It draws people in. Not many, just enough." His eyes met Daniel's. "Enough to keep it alive." Daniel's mind raced, trying to find logic in something that refused to follow any. "Alive? It's a town." "It was," the man said. "A long time ago." A distant sound echoed through the streets, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The figures around them stopped moving. Slowly, in unison, they turned their heads upward toward the frozen surface above. Daniel felt it then. A pull, not physical, but something deeper, something inside him responding to that sound. His body tensed involuntarily. "What is that?" he asked. The man's expression darkened. "It's calling." Daniel's chest tightened. "Calling what?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked directly at Daniel, his gaze sharp for the first time. "Listen carefully," he said, "because this is the only chance you have left." The hum grew louder. "You don't belong here yet," the man continued. "Not fully. You still remember what it means to leave. That's the only thing that can save you." Daniel's pulse, if it still existed, seemed to quicken. "Save me? How?" The man pointed upward toward the ice. "When it calls, the surface weakens again. For a moment. A very small moment." Daniel stared up at the pale ceiling. It seemed impossibly far away. "I can't reach that," he said. "You won't have to," the man replied. "It will pull you, just like it pulled you down." The hum deepened, vibrating through the ground, through Daniel's body. "But there's a cost," the man added. Daniel looked back at him. "What cost?" The man's expression hardened. "It won't let you go without taking something in return." A sudden movement rippled through the town. The figures began to shift, their bodies turning toward Daniel, their glowing eyes locking onto him. "It knows you're here now," the man said. Daniel took a step back. "What does that mean?" "It means," the man said quietly, "you have to choose." The figures started moving. Faster this time. Not the slow, drifting walk from before, but something sharper, more urgent. "Choose what?" Daniel demanded. The man held his gaze. "Stay," he said, "and become part of this place." The figures closed in. "Or run," the man continued, "and let it take someone else instead." Daniel's breath caught. "What?" "That's the way it works," the man said. "It always balances itself. One leaves, one takes their place." The meaning slammed into Daniel like a physical blow. "No," he said immediately. "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not." "Then you'll stay," the man said simply. The figures were close now, too close. Daniel's mind raced. Panic, clawing at the edges of his thoughts. There has to be another way. The man didn't respond, because there wasn't. The hum reached a deafening peak. The ice above them cracked. Light spilled through the fractures, blinding and sudden. Daniel felt the pull, strong, violent, unstoppable. His body lifted off the ground, dragged upward toward the breaking surface. Below him, the figures lunged, hands reached, fingers brushed against his legs, his coat, his skin. One of them grabbed hold. Daniel screamed, not in fear, not in pain, but in the sudden, crushing realization of what he had to do. And then he let go, not of the pole, but of something else, something human. The moment stretched, twisted, and snapped, and Daniel shot upward through the breaking ice, bursting into the freezing air above the lake. With a ragged, gasping breath that tore into his lungs like fire, he collapsed onto the surface, coughing, shaking, alive. The town was gone. The ice was empty. The road stretched back toward the forest, silent and still. For a long time, Daniel didn't move. When he finally did, he pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling uncontrollably. He didn't look back. He didn't want to, because somewhere beneath the ice, something had taken his place, and far below, in the silent, frozen dark, the town was still feeding.